Boards. Board games, board games. So what we're talking about. Board games, board games. I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off some streaming with another little bit of singing. And today we're talking about rules because we know that we are not fools. We are going to talk about the writing rules for games. I am going to talk about Bossy and Happy Pigs. Those are the game's names. Some rules are bad and they make me sad. Some rules they make me so confused. Some what rhymes with confused, man? Why do I keep pushing myself down these, dark things? Anyway, some rules are good and work the way they should. Some rules make me less confused. I'm just repeating the words because I can't think of another word for confused. Board games, board games. I'm not gonna shout. Board games, it's what I'm talking about. Hello! And hello, it is lovely to see you all. It is lovely to see Xate. Hello. And Alex and Alan Alton. And good morning to all the cardboard boxes. No, they don't have their own names. So I am Bez. It is if you are in not if you're in the USA. I mean, if you're in the USA, it might be bedtime for you. If you had like a really late night, I mean, it might also be getting up time for you. I mean, this kind of time, if it's 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, like I don't know what kind of time that is. It is probably bedtime in the USA. And also, if you are a small child in Australasia, maybe you're starting to think about going to bed. Anyway, I am Bez. I am going to be blethering about board games. Specifically, I am going to be talking about writing rules for board games. And hello, Paul Grogan. It is lovely to see you. Who is, of course, the master at writing rules. And I would love to have you on one day if your schedule kind of allows it one day. Now, well, whoops. Oh, darn. Sorry, I just accidentally deleted the thing. So let's start off talking about brilliant things. Brilliant things. What's a little thing which is brilliant? I'm going to say that a brilliant thing is credits. I mean, credits are often, underappreciated. I think that it's important to have credits, not only, on a box where it says, okay, this game's by these people, and, it's made these people, but also, in the rule book when it's, okay, hey, here's what's got involved. Hey, let's talk about these people. Let's talk about the fact that these people made the game, that this person, okay, there's a 2-player variant, and Bruno Kufala made that. And, I think it's good if you credit people for exactly what they did and no more, if you know what I mean. Because too often I see games where it's, okay, these are the 2 people who designed the game, but then there's all the other people who got involved. So I think it's important to remember that there are so many people involved in making a game, of course. And if all those people can get credits, then all the better. It is, of course, a kind of two-way struggle between needing more space to credit people and explain what was going on, and on the other hand, not wanting to confuse people. For example, if we look at if we look at Yogi, it doesn't credit many people, does it? Do I even have? Yeah, here's the rules. Like who does it credit other than me and Simon Caruso? It says concepts by Bez, illustrations by Simon Caruso. But there's so many more people who did stuff here. There's like the person who did the product design, the person who you know, obviously the manufacturers, the person who kind of managed the project, the people who were localizing it, and some of those people for some of the versions are credited, some of them aren't. And it just feels like, you know, all the time, it would be nice to have somewhere that you go to, even if it's like a QR link, and then you've got a big website where it says, okay, here's all the people who were involved in this game. Because, you know, the movie industry has all these, what's the word, you know, they've got all these agreements between the workers where they say, okay, we are definitely getting credited in this particular way. If you do a certain amount of thing, then you are entitled to a credit, which is why credits for movies go really long. But I think that credit and acknowledging the people who made a thing happen, that to me is a brilliant thing. Okay, so yeah. And we've got shout outs for, and want to know something sad. One of the first things I now look at in a rulebook is the credits to see who wrote it. And that's the thing, like, they don't say who wrote this rulebook. It's based on my rules, obviously, because I wrote in a bind and it's not too different. But I also believe that Rachel Mortimer was involved in getting this correct, because it was kind of behind the scenes. It was translated to French and then back into English, and then Rachel Mortimer had to come in to make sure that the English was correct. And they don't actually say who wrote the final rules for Yogi. I know it's a simple game, but yeah, they don't write that, and that's not always written. To some degree, it's about valuing what a person does. And so I think we can all agree that credits, if they can be given, if they are space, is a brilliant thing. Now, this is not just a show about games. This is also a show about life and other things. Recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights. I am going to talk about seeing Layla. Now, this does lead into games because we did play games together. Okay, here's two actual. Firstly, I walked around my house, you know, just a few blocks, maybe 4 blocks, less than a mile probably, just having a 10-minute chat with my great friend Liz, and that was a lovely recent highlight, very recent this morning. And so yeah, just having a walk and a phone chat. This is something that I've been doing regularly since Thursday. The other lovely thing was Layla coming over and sharing some delights in food. Just having some apples from our garden, which for me are a bit too sour, but Layla was like, hey, come, let's try them. And it was lovely. And also Layla bringing some home-baked stuff. So that was a recent highlight. And leading on from Layla coming over, let's talk about games. What have we been playing? What are their names? And of course, like always, I want to encourage everyone to share what were your recent highlights. What are things you have enjoyed recently? And what are games that you have been playing? Now, I'm going to give a quick overview, and then I'm going to start using these games as examples of rule books. So let me give a quick summary of what I think of these games so we can get that out of the way. Yeah, this is a Nigerian board game, Gbosi. It's War of the Thrones and Elements. It says for 6+, although unlike the other game, which I think also said for 6+, this is not just a children's game. There's a fair amount of strategy in here. It's 15 minutes, which, yeah, sure. 2 people by Philip Sheks, Thank God, and Kenichukwu Ogbuagu, KC, made in Nigeria. And yeah, it's an abstract strategy game, I would say. You've got a board that looks a bit like, well, it looks exactly like this. I don't know why I say it looks a bit like this. There's squares, there's a crown section where your king starts, and then so you put down your kings, then there's a long placement phase. Now, at the start, I thought that this whole setup was just, okay, we're going through a setup, but this setup phase is basically the game. So you're putting down all your little people, and so there are little warriors that look like that, or like that. I'll get to the rules later on in the main phase of the show. And you put around your warriors. You have to put them not in lines of 3 during setup. You cannot put them in the element squares, which kind of gives you a little bit of information about where your opponent could not block a potential line of 3, because once the game gets going, it's all about moving your warriors one space on your turn, trying to make a line of 3 every turn if you possibly can. And if you make a line of 3, you get to remove one of the other person's warriors. So strategically, you're kind of stopping them from making lines of 3, making as many lines of 3 as you can. I think there's a first player advantage. But despite that, we basically alternated playing first time. We played it 3 times. Layla started, I managed to eke out a win. Then I started and Layla just won. And then Layla started and Layla completely obliterated me. You know, there's a lot to think about in this game about making those. How do you move your little people to make those lines? How do you stop your opponents from making those lines? And just like Go, where there are shapes that you start to learn as the game goes on. Oh, that shape means this thing. You start to learn, okay, if I have these things in this particular arrangement, that means that I will always be able to make a line of 3, no matter what piece the other person removes. And you do get towards the end a little bit of moving back and forth, but I really enjoyed this. We played it 3 times. I lost twice. And then we played Happy Pigs. And then after Happy Pigs, I asked Layla if, you know, they would be happy to play Gabossi again. And then we played 2 more times and I lost twice. And so Layla is clearly better than me at Gabossi, which Layla finds astounding because I always beat Layla at abstract strategy games. But something about this, and I'm really excited by this because I really want to keep playing it, and I'm just enjoying learning it and working through it so much. So that is Gabossi by Kenichiglu. So yeah, talking about, we've got some comments. Oh, hello, Andrew January. Alan Outzen, I know this is a sarcastic comment, but honestly, the person who wrote the credits is normally also the person who wrote the rule sheet. So yes, they kind of did get credited. I mean, yeah, the same person who wrote the rules is normally the person who wrote the credits, although that's not always true. I mean, I know it kind of seems recursive, but yeah, sure. The person who did the font, that should be credited, in my opinion. You should credit saying this is the font we used and stuff, if you can, if you have the space. I understand if it's a mass market game, okay, you only want to give a couple of things. We've got Paul, who says, Tainted Grail Chapter 10. This week, that's all I've actually played. Whoa. And played Terra Mystica on Tabletopia. Was good but long. I forgot how exhausting teaching then running a game is. I guess especially if it's a big meaty game. Now, the second game that I played yesterday was Happy Pigs. Now, I do want to say I played this earlier. It might have been a month ago, and I might have said nasty things about Happy Pigs. I might have believed at the time that because there were only 2 months to a season, that you basically had to vaccinate every other month, making most of your decisions kind of pointless, and it seemed ridiculous. But I got the rules wrong, and I played it again last night with Leila. I wanted to try it 2 players, because I'd not played it 2 players before. I'd only played it at the higher player counts. And then I looked at the rules and I realized, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing wrong. You're not meant to use 8 cards, you're meant to discard 8 cards. Okay. Whoa, this is so different. So instead of using 8 cards, we use 16 cards, 4 cards per month. Anyway, let me take a step back. Happy Pigs is a very cute game. If we look at what's in the box, it says fairly full. There's a little first player marker. There's a shop. You can buy stuff. You can buy little baby piglets and big pigs and small pigs and medium pigs. Oh no, wait, these are the big pigs. The ones that I said were big were only medium. And every turn you have all these different actions, which I will run through very quickly. So it's simultaneous action selection. You can buy stuff. You can make love and have your pigs give birth. Sorry, I didn't see the little love heart. You can feed your pigs and make them grow, or you can sell your pigs for money, which is all that matters at the end of the game. This game says happy pigs, but it's not about the happiness of the pigs at all. It is a brutal economic game where you try to do a thing that your opponents aren't doing, and occasionally you get these events where you might get rewarded for having lots of little pigs or one of each size or something else. And if you choose the same action as other people, then you don't get to do quite as much because the number of actions is shared between the number of people. It is a nice simple game. Layla said they would be happy to play it again. I would be happy to play it again, and so that was a good time. I'm going to put the rule book down there, and so that is the other game I played yesterday. I think I might have actually played another game of Kitty Cataclysm, I can't remember, but that's my own game. I've already talked about that. And I don't know if this is, wow, a nice roll and write about filling up a cheese platter. I know that, yeah, this reminds me of things like salad de poing or point salad, where it's kind of, yeah, just when you said roll about making up a cheese platter, but that does sound quite fun. It's almost like someone I know was making up a roll and move game about, you've got to quickly eat a roll, and you've got to make sure that you eat your favorite sandwich, and you want to get the best sandwich you can, and then you want to also move your belongings into the furniture van. So it is a roll, as in you eat a roll and then you move game. Anyway, it was, yeah, a weird one. I don't believe that anything ever came of it, but that was definitely a thing that I saw. Anyway, so games, that is what games I have been playing. Let me know what games you have been playing, and as always, feel free to comment, ask questions, and if you're enjoying it, thumb, like, follow, but certainly comment and ask all the questions, and we will maybe Calvin will get here later. So let's move on to the questionably quick questions for myself, because why on earth not? So let me ask myself, did I have breakfast? Not really. This is kind of the closest I'm getting. So I did, yeah, basically I got up, I showered, I got up about, what time did I get up? I got up around 8:40. I think that's when I set my alarm for, and I ended up going to bed quite late because Layla and I were playing games until, I think it was past midnight. Yeah, we quite enjoyed it. Happy Pigs was maybe a little bit long for our taste. It was definitely longer than the 40 minutes it says on the box, but it was it was Layla's first time playing, and it was my first time for quite a while. Anyway, so the last thing I ate, excluding vitamin C in a thing, would be last night. I think I had, yeah, we had all sorts of snacks. Oh my God, so many snacks. I went in and I bought some crisps and I had some pork scratchings. I ended up having most of it myself because Layla had already had dinner before they came over, whereas I had not. And that is what I eat or drink. I drink water personally whilst playing games. And so that's the end of the questionably quick questions, which is very quick today. So let me get to the main topic. Oh, favorite cheese. My favorite cheese currently is the Tickler. So I get my, so I mean, I do like some nice artisanal cheese. Don't get me wrong. I remember going to Cannes both this year and last year. That's been honestly one of the highlights of my board game convention calendar, just because it's going and I've not had to work as such. I mean, yeah, I did a couple of pitches, but it feels so work light compared to normally when I go and I'm running a stand the whole time, or when I'm volunteering. And so it's basically only Bastion, and Bastion was the first convention I ever went to like that. And then it was Cannes, where, yeah, sure, I had to work for about 3 hours for Gigamic. Oh my gosh, what's a calamity. And then second time I went, I said, okay, I'll do it every day if you want. Since I was working about 6 hours over the weekend. Oh my gosh, what's a calamity, showing off my game, how terrible. But in all seriousness, yeah, being able to walk around. And then I went to Montpellier, that's the name of the place. So Montpellier, there is a gorgeous cheesemonger down the road. If you go to Montpellier, I don't know how to look, there's some amazing cheese in France. That's all I'm getting at. And frankly, all the cheese is amazing cheese. But I like tasting new things. So in terms of what cheese do I normally have over and over, for me, the cheese that I would buy right now, which I have 2 blocks of in the fridge, is the Cornish Tickler. The Cornish Tickler, available in Lidl. I'm not advertising, well, I am kind of advertising them for them, but I'm not paid by them or anything. And I just really like that cheese. It's a good standard cheese. It has been on discount sometimes, and I like it. It's got a little bit of tartness, a little bit of sourness. It is basically a cheddar, but yeah, with a little bit more going on. I want a mature cheddar. I want something with good taste in it. I want some good intensity. That is the kind of cheese that I like. And so, yeah, now that's the end of the questionably quick questions. And you can ask any other questions as we go on. Okay, so let me get into rules. I've got 3 rule sheets right in front of me, and I could probably find more if I reached slightly further. There, I can touch a few more. But let's start with the games that I've already talked about. So let's start with my game. Yogi. I did not have anything to do with the typesetting of this. And I just want to acknowledge, okay, you might have seen the rules for In a Bind back during my stream around the 1st of August. And for those who haven't, it is just white paper, it's text, and I think there might have been some cards at the front. But here, like, it's kind of gives a bit of an impression of, hey, this is going to be fun. We've got a fun, lively logo. It shows clearly, hey, contents, this is what's going on. I think that this is something that every rule sheet should have, really, unless it's a rule sheet for the L game, which is kind of different because, hey, if you've got 5 rule sheets in one box, you don't need all of them to say, hey, you have 48 cards plus these sheets. You only need one of the rule sheets to say that. Anyway, but having some pictures where it says, these many PVC cards, the 2 card holders, the rules, you want to start off, I think, obviously I am biased, but I think this is fairly well laid out. The principle and the aim, setup, how do you play, what do you do each turn, how does the game end? And then after that, here is where, if I were to be very nitpicky, I might say, well, sadistic variant starts there. Should it start there? Because sadistic variant, there's that tiny bit, and then it carries on there. Maybe the sadistic variant could be all there. Maybe they could have like put it down slightly and then lowered this slightly. Maybe this information could have been on this side. I don't know. Anyway, so they've got the sadistic variants, the team variants, and then it's like, whoa, we've got hardly any, we don't need any more space. So now it's just randomly putting in some pictures and putting on some adverts, and okay, fair enough. Again, I think we've established that credits would have been a nice thing. And I just want to reaffirm that I'm not going against Gigamic. I think that Gigamic are doing a brilliant job with Yogi. I just want to reaffirm that. And yeah, obviously I love Gigamic. I'm continuing to make games for them. I'm continuing to pitch for them. And so I love Gigamic, I love Yellow, I love KC, Nib Card Games. So none of my criticisms are meant to be, yeah, I feel like I should, just to level it, talk about something that I wrote entirely myself, because then that, oh shoot, I can't find my own rule sheet. Yeah, because I feel, but rest assured that if I talked about my own rule sheets, I would say they lack color. They are maybe a bit too much text. They aren't good, as well laid out as they could be. Like those diagrams could have maybe had a splash of color, especially for the deluxe deck. If there was like a little bit of red in there, that might have been nice, but obviously that was done due to cost. Anyway, and also I've made actual mistakes, which I do always say, if anyone spots a mistake on one of my games, like an actual mistake, like a typo or something like that, I would, yeah, give you some big award. I can't remember what I said. It was like a free copy of the new version of the game plus some sort of, yeah, certificate or something. Anyway, so obviously it's different doing this to a multi-page rule sheet, let alone something like Energy Empire, which I am going to open because why on earth not? Let's look at Energy Empire, which again I've talked about how much I loved that game, and James Maffei, rest in peace. So let's analyze them one by one. So nice headers. You want to draw the eye. You want to tell people exactly what you're looking at. You want to be simple. Principle and aim. Each turn, players draw a card and follow the indicated challenge. Each card must be obeyed until the end of the game. As the game continues, players will struggle to follow all the cards and eventually fail. In the end, there can be only one winner. I think that's pretty good at setting the scene. I think if we're talking about could this be any shorter, I think this is almost like a thing to think about all the time. With CALVIN Wong Tze Loon, we talked about the back of the box, how Energy Empire, it could have maybe taken out the first sentence and been a stronger back of the box. It didn't need to repeat the words in Energy Empire, you do blah, blah, blah. It could have just said you do blah, blah, blah. In this game, it could be, does it need to say players, or should it say each turn? Okay, each turn players draw a card, or each turn you draw a card. Okay, each turn players draw a card. That's and follow the indicated challenge. And follow the instruction. Follow the instruction seems to be like a little bit more natural to me. Each card must be obeyed until the end of the game. I mean, this is the critical parts of it, because some people have actually played Yogi. I mean, some drunken people where they said, oh, one finger touching nose. Okay, I did that. Okay, discard an armpit. Okay, I did that. And then they just think for some reason that they do it one at a time. This is the critical part. As the game continues, players will continue to follow all their cards and eventually fail. Actually, you know what? I know this is based on something that I wrote, but I think that's reasonable. Anyway, so go on, have headers, have bullet points. If you want to have, okay, draw, read, do, and then go on till the end of the game. Make it as quick as you can, but make it as brief as you can. Don't dilly-dally and repeat information, especially in a party game. I'm going to put that away because now I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, Casey. I really love you, but the rules for Kenechukwu's games are not well written. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on here. And firstly, it says in full color. There are quite nice diagrams. It shows you, okay, you do not put free in a sequence. Wrong. All of these things are wrong. You cannot do this. Putting your thing on a, it's a little bit small. It could have maybe been zoomed in, but fundamentally it's clear. But then there are some typos, which is never great. Also, most importantly, there's some bits that are unclear. The active player begins by moving any warrior on the board one step vertically and horizontally, forward or backward. Vertically and horizontally. We talked about this. Now, I'm not just being a rules lawyer, but honestly, if I were to read this, I would assume that you have to move one, basically you have to move diagonally. That's what the game is telling you. That's what I would assume. But if you kind of read through the entire rules, it kind of makes it clear that actually it's meaning that you move one space vertically or horizontally, forwards or backwards. And yeah, that's the way the game makes sense. There are things that just aren't said. The king has an ability to jump to any element. Is the king also a warrior? Does the king also get to move back to where it started? Now, for when a player mistakenly sets 4 or above of their warriors in a row or column, the other player, and it should be player singular, eliminates one of the player's warriors. And again, it should be an S. And these typos, I mean, I know it seems like I'm nitpicking, but and again, I know that KC working in Nigeria, it has they're looking for, I mean, to be fair, they are working from a different situation. They don't have all the privileges that we have. They don't maybe have English necessarily as a first language, but yeah, typos just, they are going to pop up, but please get other people to read through again and again as much as you can, because this is the first experience. Just to explain my experience with this game, I'm going to be honest, okay? I read these rules and then I was like, oh my gosh, so I was excited to play. I was bringing it out. So I was like, okay, let's play this. And then I read the rules and I was like, okay, wow, I don't even know exactly how to play. We're going to have to make up some house rules to even play this. We're going to have to make some liberal interpretations of stuff. But then once we start playing, it's actually a good game. Now, if I had not, if I had picked this up at a board game cafe, if I had, been looking at this at a demo in any other environment, we might have, played this in a board game cafe or a convention and pick this up and be like, okay, let's just give up on this. Let's play something else. Because rules are so important, because they are the first, what's the word? First impression. That's the word thing. First impression. And yeah, rules are hard to write. Now, let me get into how to win. When any player concedes, the game ends. When any player places their warrior on the player's crown, on the other player's crown wins. This happens when a player's king is not on the crown and so leaves it open. So, as written, why would I concede? Why would I concede? Yeah, I mean, I kind of assume generally that giving up, and Layla are like, so I'm always allowed to give up, surely. I'm always allowed to say, hey, I'm just not wanting to play. Like in Yogi, I don't think we explicitly say it, but the intention is you are always allowed to give up. If you're ever in pain, then, it just says, if a player stops obeying a card's instruction, even for a second, they instantly lose. Players should be honest, even if no one else notices. When a player fails to follow a card, a player should admit the failure and resign. If a player can't draw a card at the start of their turn, they lose. Now, what it doesn't say is you're allowed to give up. Now, let me know. It should... Javier suggests that vertically and horizontally is correct. Otherwise, it should say diagonally. No, my point is that if you move one space, then it should say vertically or horizontally. My issue is with the and. So if you're moving orthogonally, it should say vertically or horizontally. If the intention is you move one space, then that and versus an or changes everything. Okay. Anyway, I hope that I've explained that, Javier. Anyway, so the final bit that I'm talking about is how to win. So by the rules, why would I ever give up? Yeah, why would I? And if any player places their warrior on the other player's crown, so there's no reason, there's no obligation to. Exactly. Thank you. And hello, J Fool's Guard. It is lovely to see you. We're talking about rules and games, and I am currently going through this, and I'm going through that, and then I'm going through that. So yeah, so the rules as written, you do not need to move your king away. So there's never a situation where the other person is definitely going to get their king onto your board. So the rules as written, I just refuse to play, because why would you concede? I kind of reframed it as, okay, let's say once you are down to 2 people, then you lose. Because once you're down to 2 people, you're not able to make a line of 3, and you're not able to take someone else's pieces off the board. And so that makes sense. When someone's down to 2 people, you lose. If you want to state that, yes, the game can be lost well before you reach the point, because your initial setup is so important. Glad it's clear, Javier. If the initial setup is so important that to say, okay, you might want to give up, I think, okay, that could come into 3, like as a reminder. If you know, if it is obvious who is going to win, feel free to give up and start another game. Like that sort of advice. I have a lot of time for things like that, being in a little box out or in italics or in some other treatment where it's not officially the rules of the game, but it's just tips on how to have fun. I personally have that on the back of the Fable rule sheet, where I don't know if Paul has the deluxe L deck, but certainly in the deluxe L deck, or you can, I think, see it online. On the back, it says, hey, here's some useful words for awkward letters. Hey, if you've got X, remember that you can talk about Xylem. Or, yeah, if it's a storytelling game, you could talk about the X-Men or Xena, or a Zeister, which is a tool for scraping bones, or the Xenopus, which is a clawed frog, which I only know. But like those sorts of tips, it's helpful for people who are struggling. Anyway, so you can have these sorts of tips. But basically what I'm saying is that rules, what should they do? They should be, firstly, they should give us a sense of what this game is about. This does it by saying, okay, this is a 2-person game. It has a reminder of, okay, it's a 6+, and I do like it when they have a bit of credits, which isn't here, it's on the box. But I think that fundamentally rules are there for multiple purposes. Firstly, rules are there to teach you the rules. I mean, yeah, for someone who's never played the game before to read through and then say, okay, how do I play this? That's his purpose number 1. Purpose number 2 is as a refresher. Hey, I've not played Happy Pigs for over a month. I'm going to need to double check it. I'm going to need to flick through. Oh, wow. Look, I got a rule completely wrong last time. Oh, look, there's a 2-player variant that I only saw because I'm quickly flicking through. That's purpose number 2. Purpose number 3, reference mid-game. Hey, do you pick up, even if you do that special action? That's purpose number 3. And then there's also, those are the 3 main purposes. So rules for first information, rules for refresher, rules for mid-game reference. But arguably, you've also got rules for entertainment. Some people want to read the rules and be like, okay, wow, I'm just going to read these rules and get me excited about playing. Reading through these rules should be like, okay, here, this is like getting me excited. This is going to tell me a little bit about the game. Make sure that my first game is a good one. These rules are going to give me an impression of what this game is all about. These rules are going to, get me primed. Not just teach me the game, but might even infuse it with a bit of levity, which I know that believe it's Vlad does a fair bit of in, for example, Dungeon Lords or whatever. Sorry if I've got to, yeah, now I'm like, that's his, I'm not getting that name wrong, am I? It is Vlad who did Dungeon Lords, Dungeon Pets, and Bunny Bunny Moose Moose, right? And Codenames. Anyway, and yeah. Hello, Calvin.
I'm so sorry.
It's all good. I've just been talking about, really gotten into flow. We've been talking about like, and yeah, we've just been talking about Vlad and like how they inject the rules with. Oh shoot! I need to really plug in my laptop, otherwise it is going to die in about.
Well, Paul's in the chat anyway, so clearly you just did it with Paul instead of me. Great, brilliant.
But yeah, basically what we've, to catch you up, we've looked at the Yogi rules where I have, reaffirmed that I love Gigamic because they are paying me money, and they did do genuinely a good job overall with Yogi. They did a brilliant job with it. I love it. And then we talked about Nib Cards games, and they do great work in Nigeria, but the rules are a short point, and this is something that Casey could absolutely improve on. And then I was going to talk about these rules, Happy Pigs and Energy Empire. And yeah, and thank you for the pronunciation. Apparently there's an echo on your audio.
Yeah, I haven't got my earphones in.
Let me mute you for a moment. So yeah, going to those purposes for rules, it's rules. I mean, you've got the Fantasy Flight example, don't you? Where Fantasy Flight have, okay, here's the rules for your first game. Here's the almost quick start rules, and then here's the rules for reference. It's kind of what they started off in Settlers of Catan, right? I don't know if Settlers of Catan was actually the first ever one to do it, but what I like is that at the start of it, it's boom, boom, boom. Here's how to get into your first game. Here's the standard setup, and here's like, okay, now the almanac. Let's go into everything. And by the way, Paul wants to say, now that you're here, Paul just agreed to do a tutorial video for Merv by Fabio Lopiano. Great person, lovely designer. I had lots of good times with Fabio, but Fabio's now in Italy and quite far away geographically. But anyway, Paul was happy to see you mentioned in the credits.
Yeah, it was a nice of Osprey to reach out and ask me to work on that.
So, Calvin, shall we just carry on going through some rules and going over? Because now you're here, let's talk about how we can push together. Like, maybe I'll keep these two rule sheets for future. I just want to say okay, I love Yellow. They make great games, and I'm not dissing this game. This overall is a great rule sheet. But I just want to say one thing that personally really confused me. So this bit, do you see? Okay, I will admit I did not read this as carefully as I should have. I was in the middle of the game. There were 5 people wanting to play. We all wanted to start as quickly as we could. Yeah. It says, okay, 2 cards per season, 8 cards. And okay, how many season cards do we need? Okay, I see the bit where it says 8 season cards in total. Okay, and then maybe I just, using it as a reference, we've already played it. Okay, and then I see the 8 season cards total where it's telling you how many to discard. And because I'm rushing, I read that as that's how many you're meant to use. Do you get what I mean? And so I totally messed that up the time before last that I played. And it is a terrible game if you only play with 2 cards per season. But if you play with what you're meant to do, which is 4 cards per season, then it's actually quite reasonable. And yeah, what I would say is if you're telling people how many to discard, I would almost say it's more important to say how many to have in the game.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I worked on a rulebook where we did something similar, which is, there's like, let's say, there's 20 cards in the deck, but you're not using all 20 of them every game. So instead of saying discard 13 cards, what we said was use 7 cards, like take 7 cards from that deck and place the rest in the box, or
Yeah.
I can't 100% remember.
And you always want to count the lower number. And so I think that's why here they went with the 8 rather than 16. But just having a bit of confirmation, you discard 8, you use the remaining 16. Something like that, just so that someone who's skimming it for a refresher doesn't get the rules completely wrong and think, hey, how did we ever enjoy this the first time we played it? And
there's also something else there which I kind of have I'm not 100% sure about. This is like something that I'm not actually. Could you bring the thing back? Just that.
You want me to show the exact same bits?
Yeah. Because it says, right, okay, arrange them into a stack. Spring on top, then summer, fall, and winter beneath. Now, okay, I understand why they did it like this, because it's the seasons, right? It's spring first, summer, fall, and winter. But you don't arrange cards like that, right? Like you arrange them from the bottom, right? And I'm just sort of wondering which one would be better, or if it doesn't really make a difference. Because when we did our thing, that it's the same thing, right? You have to take a certain number of cards and then arrange them. We did it from the bottom up. So we tell them, place these cards at the bottom, place these cards on top of it, place the next cards on top of it, and then, so it was like building a sandwich. So we told them, put the bread on the bottom, put the lettuce, then put the tomatoes, then put the meat, then put the sauce, and put the last bread on top. So that's how we arranged the rule. And there was a diagram to illustrate like all the different layers of cards. And I'm sort of wondering whether this approach of telling them to do the seasons top to bottom is better or not, and I'm not sure.
I mean, I think there's definitely an advantage to it in this way, that for the player, it's like, okay, it clarifies the order of the seasons. It's like, okay, this is why we're doing this thing, and we are going spring, summer, fall as not you Americans, as the people who speak American English. In Malaysia, I mean, would you say you speak American English as opposed to British English? I mean,
no, we're a British colony.
Okay. Sorry, I'm showing my ignorance. But,
no, it's fine. I mean, there's American colonies everywhere.
So you would call it autumn?
Yeah. Except we don't have autumn, so we don't call it anything.
And so, Andrew January says, I think that you're right, Calvin. In general, bottom up is better, but in this particular instance, having the seasons in order outweighs it a little bit. And that's the thing, like every game is different, and
every game is different,
But here, having that one section, that is so critical.
I would have put a paragraph break.
I'm also just looking. Sorry at this diagram. I'm just really nitpicking here. When it has the line to what you're meant to do, there's only 6 cards there. I counted them just now. There's only 6 cards. That's basically showing there's 6 cards for each season as it happens, but that is not how the deck should be looking at the end. If they wanted to show, hey, you have a lot of cards, then show 16 cards, and then it would be like, oh, wow, okay, I've got to have it. I think this is also partially what contributed to me only having 8 cards.
That's a graphic design issue. When you first held up the rule sheet, I thought that was only one of the piles. So I made that exact same assumption as you did. Like I thought that was only one of the 4 piles that you needed. So I agree with you completely. And I also, that paragraph that you showed us, I would have split it into 2 paragraphs. After 8 season cards in total, I would have put the gather into the next paragraph.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense to split it out, and I'm not arguing with displaying it out, but because now that I look at it, all of those cards, I can just see a smidgen of the graphic of the card, so they are actually all the identical card back. So it's just, hey, here's what you get before you even do anything with these things. Whereas the rest of the image is almost like, hey, here's how it's set up, which is a little bit of a disparity. Now, I don't think it has to be the exact number. If in general it's like, okay, here's the deck, you can just have a bunch of lines beside it, and that's fine, especially if it's just a whole bunch of things. But I think the key thing here, and the key takeaway for us, if we are writing rules in the future, is to say, okay, what's the key parts of your game where people might mess up? What are the key parts of your game where if someone messes it up, this will ruin the entire game? And make sure that those parts are clear. And also the other thing is that, frankly, people will mess things up.
Bye, Paul.
Oh, bye, Paul. It's lovely to have you. And yeah, hopefully see you at some point in, more physical with your face and everything at some point in the future. I hope you have a good day at work. Enjoy. Now,
no, I completely agree with you. That's why in another rulebook that I did, we did have a thing where make sure you do these, otherwise your game will not work. It's like
I wanted to sorry, I don't know if this is too close to the bone. I wanted to pick you up on something you wrote. I believe that I've had someone express confusion about trying to look for a copy of this book. So in this book, someone asked me about Flowers Over Towers. Yeah, so you wrote, sorry about, I hope you don't feel like on the spot, Calvin, here. It says, to each turn, where is it? With the bit when it starts up. On the first turn only, this bit, so Flowers Over Towers is a game that I designed and pitched to Inkwell Games, who did Dice and Ink. And it says on this page, beginning with the start player, roll the 3 dice. On the first turn only, the starting player may only fill in 1 river space. See Fill the River for more details. Now, someone got in touch, and I thought that was fairly well written, but someone expressed the confusion to me on Instagram, saying, hey, I'm about to play this game, because they knew me, like had started following them. They make really nice videos. It's Nona Plays Games, by the way. And then they said, hey, I know you made this game. What is your intention for the start of it? Do you mean that if we fill in the river, you only get to fill in 1 space? Or do you mean that this is literally the only option that you have? And I said that my intention was that is literally the only option that you have, because normally there's a first player advantage. So my intention was that, okay, instead of having a first player advantage, let's have a second player advantage, but the first player gets to do a tiny little thing which, gets them started in the game at least. But that was something that caused a little bit of confusion.
Can you show it to me?
On the first turn only, the starting player may only fill in 1 river space.
Okay, I see what you mean now. The ambiguity, right? Like, you can only fill in 1 river space on your first turn, or if you choose to fill in a river space, that you can only fill in 1. Okay, yeah. No, you're right. You're right. So to clarify that, it would have been the first player may only do 1 thing, which is to fill in 1 river space. Yep. And didn't catch that. My fault.
No, I mean, these are the things that it is, as Paul said earlier, writing rules is hard. and I'm just going to flag this up every time that, I guess the lesson here is that, you know how the Halifax Hammer like situation in
Yeah.
A Few Acres of Snow, and it's something that you can get into a bit of groupthink. Fundamentally, board games don't have generally the budget to do what is ideal, which is, frankly, the ideal situation, which you can do if you've got the budget of someone a bit bigger, like, say, Hasbro. You can put some people behind one-way mirrors, study them whilst they read stuff, and then observe them, and then pay them for their time, or at the end, offer them product instead of the money, and that tells you how good your product is. If because I know that Mark Rosewater talks about, okay, we at the end of maybe an hour, we say, okay, either you get X dollars or you get X plus Y value of product. So you get to choose. I don't know what exactly the payment rate is, but maybe you either get $15 for the hour for coming in and playing something, or you get $30 worth of magic boosters. And if it's like, okay, people are choosing the boosters, that shows that people actually like the thing. If people want the money, that shows that it's not very good. And we really need to work harder on that. And so this kind of analysis and this kind of repeatedly getting people in, and even for playtesting, frankly, I mean, it comes back to resources, I feel, of games that are sadly still relatively low budget. I mean, I feel like there are basically only there's very few people who have the playtesting resources or the rules writing resources that would be ideal. You could argue no one does have the resources that would be ideal, because infinite would be the ideal number. Now, before you came on, Calvin, I talked about what I see as 4 reasons for rules. I don't know if you overheard that. So firstly, to learn the rules for the first time. Secondly, to refresh yourself after you've played a game, like maybe you played it last month or whatever. Thirdly, for mid-game reference. And fourth, which is kind of to set the tone of the game. Because if I see this, there are, like, the whole graphic design, it kind of tells me, okay, this is how the game should be. And it kind of indicates, okay, even the layout, the way that it looks, the color that they chose, everything about it kind of sets that tone. And when Vlada Chvátil writes some jokes in Galaxy Trucker or Bunny Bunny Moose Moose or whatever, yeah. So Alan Outson asks, do large games publishing houses have dedicated rule sheets book teams? Do you know? If so, is it the same team that finalizes rules for a game? Would you be able to say anything about this from your not inside knowledge, but your links, your connections at FFG?
I don't know about FFG. Some companies might, some companies might not, and I think it's really different between every company. Different places which just do things differently.
I mean, I know that Paul writes really regularly for CGE, and I think it's more and more the case that maybe people are freelancing for this, but if people are good at what they do, they will be picked up again. So let's get into these 4 let's actually get into what I normally do. If we do you think I've kind of defined it fairly reasonably as to the purpose of rule sheets, or do you think there's anything else? And would you price some of these above the others?
It's hard because you kind of have to do all of them. You can't afford to do all of them because, and I think the weight is towards the first play, because if you can't have a second play without a first play. So in my opinion, I think that has to be given the most priority, because if you can't, if they don't actually get to play the game correctly, then they might not ever play it again. But also, it's something that's sort of out of your control, because sometimes no matter how well you write the rules, you could have written the best rule book ever written, and then somebody will just sort of half read it or misread it or interpret it in a completely different way because of an assumption that you have. I mean, I like to make this example. It's a very absurdist example, but the term draw card, right? Every board gamer knows what it means, right? So when you say, okay, draw 3 cards from this deck, but what if you're playing a drawing game and the player who might not be, the people who reads this rule book, who might not be, are familiar with board games, familiar with card games, or might not know English very well, thinks that the instruction means to draw 3, like physically illustrate 3 cards from them. So at some point you're going to run into ambiguities no matter what you do, right?
And there's like the whole Magic the Gathering cards. I don't know if you know the card ambiguity.
No.
Okay, carry on. I'll kind of try, and I think as long as we talk about it is, give me a minute and I will try and find it. Okay, so ambiguity is a card for oh wow, that's really small. Man, they used to make texts very small, didn't they? So this card is for Unhinged, which was where they kind of joked around with stuff. And it says, whenever a player plays a spell that counters a spell that has been played, or a player plays a spell that comes into play with counters, that player may counter the next spell played, or put an additional counter on a permanent that has already been played, but not countered. And this is a joke. This is kind of them deliberately
it's a joke card,
making it as ambiguous as possible. And the ambiguity is also the picture. It's not meant to be totally clear which way up it is. So just to be clear, Magic the Gathering is not normally as ambiguous as this, and it's not, and they actually did a really good job of highlighting this. So back in the day, the word play was both for casting a spell, but also comes into play. Whereas now they've actually changed both those terms. They say cast a spell and enters the battlefield. They still have the word counter, which is ambiguous, because they have a counter. You can have a +1/+1 counter, you can have a -1/-1 counter, or you can counter a spell. And so, yeah, the point is that whatever words you have, the more things that this word could refer to, even in, you need to think not just within the scope of your game, because obviously Magic the Gathering has been going on long enough that people learn magic keys, as people might call it, where words means very specific things, not just their English meaning, but within the rules of Magic. And people take tests to become judges. But yeah, with a normal game where you aren't relying on people to do that, you need to think not only what draw might mean in your own game, or what flip might mean in your own game, or what turn, because you might turn a card and you might have different turns. And you've got to think about what it might mean in the entirety of the English language for just someone who's going through.
Yeah, no, definitely, because you have cards, like you said, you have this thing like counter, you have things like draw, you have things like of course, now that I have to think about it, I'm completely drawing a
Turn.
blank. Ambiguities like that exist, right? I always like to talk about unspoken assumptions. Like, for example, like we assume that people know what a deck of cards is. We assume that people know what drawing a card is. We assume that what's the first rule in the thing? It's like place the board in the center of the table. You're assuming that there is a table. Some people don't have a flat big enough for a table. You know, they might be playing on the floor. So that's why it's probably better to say place the board within easy reach of all players, right?
Yeah, or place the board between everyone, or lay the boards where you're playing. I don't know. Or lay out the board.
Sorry, what? Yeah. No, you're right. Something like that, right? So the whole point is that I try to avoid as many of these unspoken assumptions as you can. So when I say it, I try not to say draw a card, right? Like I say, like, draw a card into your hand or whatever. But at the same time, you have to balance that, because space is premium when you're writing rules, and the more text there is, the more likely that players are going to tune out. Yeah.
So, Calvin, I know you've never played this game, but have you heard of it?
Yeah, Blether, yeah.
Okay. So an early version of the rule sheet kind of took the joke of I'm using extra words and used that for every section of the rule book. And then basically it was the first step was, okay, what does it mean to draw a card? And then I kind of defined in very clear English so that someone who had never played a game before, who had never heard of drawing a card, would understand exactly what drawing a card meant. Yeah. And then I kind of started then I added other sections where it says, okay, to play this game, you need to have this many players. And then I would have like a big paragraph about how to find players and how to meet players and how to get people into a game. Anyway, so I later realized that, okay, it is a party game. I do want to have just rules on one sheet of paper. I don't want to make it a ridiculous thing. But there have been a few people who said, yeah, you know what, that extra long version of the rules that you had, that should almost be like an art piece, like a big heavyweight book that's just, okay, the rules of the game that could fit on one sheet of paper, but really analyzing how you find players, how you turn a card, how you draw a card, how you talk, exactly. Because it's also within okay, let's talk about party games for a moment, because the more lightweight and social and party style a game is, the more assumptions that you're going to have to make. It's like, okay, what is reasonable for this? What is not? In playing Jungle Speed, I have had to make so many house rules, because you come into edge cases and it's like, okay, what if someone...
What if people touch it at the same time?
Yeah, not just grabbing it at the same time, but that's fairly clear. But like, what if someone flips over a card so it's a match, but then by the time you grab it, one of those cards has been covered. Let's say you flip your card, it's a match, but then the next person covers their card. Is that allowed? And then we had to kind of make a house rule that felt like it worked for us as a group. But that's not necessarily even the kind of thing that a party game should address, because it comes up maybe once in every 30, 50 games. Then frankly, for a party game, people are going, okay, fine, whatever. But with a more heavyweight game like Energy Empire, which I keep talking about because, yeah, it's a good game. If I came up in a situation like that where, okay, we're in an awkward edge case, I'd be like, well, this is a heavyweight strategic game. The designer really should have thought of this and really should have explained this. So part of it is, and talking about context, Alan Outson's point of IKEA-style rule sheets, that is absolutely something that I would love to do, although it is going to be intensely difficult. I have seen rule sheets with where there is minimal text, where it's kind of like a comic. And I almost attempted this in a way with the back of Grabble, but and other companies have attempted this as well, but I've never seen one that is literally only numbers and words, i.e. literally language independence. But I do think that you need those words to add a little bit of clarity, because whilst pictures can be worth 1,000 words, they can also be not as clear.
Yeah. So, and there's also the whole thing where you can't do picture-only rule sheets because at some point you need symbols.
Because
symbols.
Oh yeah.
You need symbols, and symbols introduce ambiguity, right? Like you might think, okay, so let's say if you want to focus on something in your picture-only rule sheet, you have like a pointing hand, maybe, and but then what if a player interprets that to mean you touch the thing or you pick up the thing, right? Yeah. So it might, like, illustrations help.
I mean, for goodness sake, there's like, if we look at symbols that really matter, like on road signs, like road signs have been developed, and if there was like a set of symbols that everyone would understand, they would put them up. But there's a reason why there is a theory test. Sure, there is a language there, but you have to learn that language. And sure, we might all understand, okay, 50 in a circle generally means this is the speed limit, but what does the little arrows going round mean? What does that little horse mean? Does it mean watch out for horses? Does it mean give way to horses? Does it mean attention? Horses are likely to be here. I don't know. And there's a reason why there is a theory test in driving, basically, and a lot of it is to do with signs, because, as you say, sorry, just building on your points.
Yeah, I mean, even road signs are still ambiguous, right? Like you eventually have to teach people what they do. I remember having to memorize road signs for my driving test. Yeah.
Okay, so we've decided that rules do have these different purposes, and yeah, how can we, what are some things that we should strive for, do you think? I talked about before you came in, I mean, I think that this is a pretty good thing. Like, I know obviously I'm biased. Hold on, let me change this. But we've got the contents, a nice diagram, principle and aim set up, how to play, and end of the game. And then that's it. Then there's also the sadistic variant, which I encourage everyone who likes the sound of being sadistic and potentially having people being sadistic to them. You know, that's a variant for you. And then there's a team variant. And so for me, that's a nice logical flow. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because the thing is, there's no the problem with talking in generalizations is that there's no one size fits all. Like with your yellow game example, I can't remember the name of the game. Sorry. Like, you know, the general agreement is that you should do it from the Happy Picks, that you should do it from the bottom up, but the seasons thing changes it, and that sort of leads into a point that I want to make, which is, I think we've talked before about how, like, the thematics of the game influence how a game is perceived and how rules can be taught, right? Like if it was a game about, for example, pigs, right? People know things about pigs that you can use to help theme your game. Like,
they're going to grow.
Huh?
Like, yeah, they're going to grow.
They're going to grow. They're going to eat, right? So if you say put a food cube next to the pig house, people understand. Okay, so it's for the pigs to eat. But if you say put a plasma cube next to the Ventron injector, they're like, what? You know. So the theme of the game, even though the purpose of the mechanics are exactly the same, influences how people learn the game, right? I want to talk about this comment here, which is there are more and more common symbols.
Before we get to Jeroen's comment, which I did flash up because I want to, just to say that I know that that's been talked a lot as what is called piggybacking, because you piggyback off this existing knowledge. And I think the ultimate example of that is Plants vs. Zombies, where it's like, okay, well, you need something that's, if you've got plants, what do you expect? You expect them to stay in place. You put them down, you don't expect them to move. That's exactly what they needed for this tower defense game. Okay, you need something that's moving very slowly, it's very brain dead, you're happy to kill it. Okay, zombies, perfect. And so that's like piggybacking. Now, Rowan says, if you look at the new board games, don't you agree that there are more and more common symbols? They use them for more games for the same reason.
Yeah, so that's something that, you know, a commonly accepted meaning spreads through society, right? And they become more and more commonly understood. People use them more often. It's a very common concept in semiotics that I cannot remember the name of. But for example, you know, everybody knows that the diskette is the save icon.
What?
The disk. Yeah, you know, when you set the save icon, it looks like a diskette, even though nobody has actually had a diskette. Yeah. Nobody has actually had it. And you see, you call it a floppy disk, but that's not, it wasn't the floppy kind. That was the kind before that.
I mean, it was floppy inside. It came in a hard plastic case, but the bits inside was floppy.
All right, fair enough. But you see, but this is what I'm trying to say, right? Like the symbol itself has been so persistent through time, even though the thing that the symbol is referencing is gone.
I've got to admit, having said that, I've not seen that symbol probably for even a decade at this point.
What, really? Because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Like I'm opening my writing program right now, just to have a look at the save icon. I'm fairly certain the save icon is still there.
I mean,
yeah, it's still there. It's still a diskette. Still a diskette.
That's don't know. I basically use BB Edit for writing, which is just like a plain text editor. I'm opening up InDesign. Like, I'm fairly sure there's no icons in that. It's just like text. Yeah, there's no icons anywhere. It's just save.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Fair enough. Do board game rules ever have to have additional health and safety instructions, such as do not eat the dice? Well, a dice roll is not something you eat. That's very funny. It's on the back of the box, actually, for ages X and up. Right, that's the health and safety thing. Choke warning, choking hazard, small parts.
I mean, an interesting thing is that when I made Inner Bind, I had a kind of, it wasn't written by a lawyer, but I had a thing on it that says, you know, you're responsible for any injuries, didn't be an umpty. And on Yogi, they don't have anything that says, you know, if you're in pain, stop doing this. Because I have heard stories of some Americans being really suit heavy. And so I do slightly worry about someone saying, oh, I dislocated my shoulder whilst playing Yogi. And it's like, yeah, and then I looked at other dexterity games, like potentially more well-known ones like Twister, and that doesn't have a health and safety thing in it. I thought, well, if anything should have a health and safety thing, it should be Twister, which slightly surprised me, but I was like, okay, fair enough.
I just think that there's a lot of really good questions being asked here, which is like about symbols, really, which is like, you know, which symbols are common? Are they common everywhere? Right? Because if you showed the save icon to somebody born, you know, 10 years ago, they wouldn't know what the heck it was. Even something as common as like play, pause, record, you know, our symbols. Play, pause, stop, record. Like, why are those the symbols that we decided on? Even something like open lift, close lift, the symbols on the elevator doors, right? Those are not.
Oh yeah.
You know, those are not actually as universal as you think. Like if you pull up the open lift, close lift symbols, they're actually more ambiguous than at first glance, but they're somehow universally accepted for all elevators everywhere. Like pull it up on screen now. Pull it up on screen now. Like I want to make this point. Okay. Open lift and close lift. Right? Which one is which?
Well, the one that's going in is open. I mean, close. The one that's going that way is open.
Is it? Is it though? Because you're assuming that the pointing is the direction. The door, but some people assume that the flat side represents the doors. Right? If you assume that the arrows represent the direction of motion of the lift doors, then it's not ambiguous. But what if people assume that the flat side of the arrows are representing the doors of the lift? Then the meaning is reversed.
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, I do.
What's happened here is that whoever designed these symbols, and I don't know who, has assumed that arrows are universal and that they didn't need a stem. Like this symbol did not need a stem for the arrow. You know, because arrows usually have like a pointy bit and then a stem, because that's where arrows are like. The play button, fast forward, back and stop symbol are universally known. Yeah, they are. But what if you showed them to somebody who has never seen that thing before? Would they be able to figure it out? Square. Why is square stop? It's a square. Why is record a circle? It's literally a circle, right? They are universally known because, well, universally known because they are commonly used, and we understand.
I mean, they are known well in everywhere where modern technology exists.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that if at any point with assumptions, you're going to run into edge cases, right? And sometimes you just have to say, okay, you know what? Maybe people won't understand what draw a card means, and we're just going to have to live with it. You know, we can't be explaining the term draw a card in our rule book, because for 99.999% of our players, it won't matter, and we are wasting space and, you know, valuable space, and we are inserting too much text. So it's a very difficult tipping point. And it's sort of hard to say, because you obviously, everyone says, yeah, you need to make your game as accessible as possible to everyone. But without realizing that sometimes to make it accessible for absolutely everyone, you're making it less accessible for everyone. Specifically in the case of how much text you have to use, right? Like it's obviously better if I use 3 words instead of 15, you know?
Yeah, because people get tired, and if you explain to someone, then someone else finds the text harder to navigate. And I would posit almost that, yeah, if it had not said 8 season cards in total, when I'm referring back to this bit, if it just had said randomly discard 2 cards per season, gather the remaining season cards, ideally I would have liked it to have 2 more numbers. I would have liked it to say gather the remaining 16 season cards. And there's even space on that line to input the number 16. This is a really small point, but sometimes, sorry, I keep coming back to that one bit in Happy Pigs. Yellow do make great stuff. I love Yellow, and this is not an overall thing. It's just that anything that we do is going to be imperfect. Like, you know, you've made imperfect stuff. I've made imperfect stuff. And all we can do is try to be a little as good as we can be, given the time and energy constraints that we have, basically.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always a trade-off. It's always about balance. You definitely have to find like the right way of clarity. Like brevity versus clarity is one thing. You also have generalities versus edge case. You also, what you talked about, like learning the rules for the first time is not the same rule book as referencing the rules in the middle of the game, it's a completely different way to do it. Because like, how many times have everyone in the chat? How many times have you been reading a rule book and be like, I know I saw this rule somewhere, I just cannot find it. You know? And that's a rules reference issue. Like you're like, wait, wasn't there a thing where if I do this, I get 2 cards instead of 1 card? And the other person is like, yeah, I kind of remember that. And they're like, but where is it? I can't find it in the rule book. It's there, but you just can't find it. Or you imagined it and it's from a different game. Or you just wholesale invented it because that's how it worked in a different game, and
Johan asks, what would be the meaning of a zombie face? And I think the point is just to show that if you do that, do new symbols, people just don't know what it means.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's really, really difficult. I don't have an answer for like everything, because you can't have an answer that fits all situations. The point is that you have to try and find the solution for every, and that's another thing, right? Like every game is different. Every game is different because of the theming, because of the specific.
Use just existing symbols, and it was super easy to explain a game. Would that game have anything new to offer?
Probably. I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Because like one of the games I worked on is a deck builder, and usually in deck builders, what happens to your money when you spend it? It just goes in your discard pile, right? It's like the normal Dominion Ascension thing. You spend the money, it goes in your discard pile. But for the deck builder I made, when you spend the money, it goes back to the supply in the center of the table. And this was really, really important, because if people didn't do that, the economy of the game breaks really hard.
Oh, wow.
Right? The idea is that if you spend money, it's gone. And the only reason we could do this is because it's money. And people understand intuitively, thematically, that's how money works. Right? If you spend money in a game, it goes away. If you spend money in real life, it goes away. But it also broke the deck building tradition of when you spend a resource, it goes into your discard pile. In this case, when you spend the money disappears forever. Right? And you have to earn it back another way. But it was difficult. A lot of people apparently still got this wrong, and it completely breaks the game.
And so I think, we need to take note of the points that are likely to be had the mistake made, and you can have maybe like little box outs or something that will clarify and go into a little bit more detail, or just double state, almost for want of a better word, reaffirm the concepts that, if not applied, will completely break the game. We have Andrew January, who says the organization of concepts for learning is entirely different than the organization for reference. It's a really tricky problem. If you have a separate book for reference, it can be hard to find, because relating to what Calvin was saying, where you remember where in the original rules it was, but not in the reference.
Yeah, if there is a rules reference, I like the alphabetical, this is like, default, like for related concepts, C, 5.3.2 style of writing rule books. Like that's good for rules reference.
Like a really thorough index.
Yeah, it's an index, exactly. The next one, I like the idea that the rules incorporate the theme or some aspect of the game is describing, either the language or the graphics or whatever. Yes, definitely, because it will really help people learn the game if you put the theme in. And I think one of the best people to do this is Vladika Bartil, or whoever writes the rules for Vladika Bartil games, because it integrates the theme very well. Like for example, in Dungeon Pets, if you have a pet and it produces poop, you just say put a brown cube there. It's this is a biological function. We don't have to talk about it, or something like that. It's something like that in the rule book. But yeah.
And I just want to talk about the fact that you have to, there is a line, there's a balance to be drawn between having flavorful language such as Battlefield and whatnot in Magic. You know, it's not a deck, it's your library. And the only reason that Magic is able to get away with it is because it's such a cultural phenomenon. If you start saying, okay, you are drawing cards from the top of your garden and then putting them into your personal allotment, I mean, that's going to...
I mean, garden and allotment is not so bad because everybody understands what a garden and allotment is, right? Kind of.
But if I'm talking about my deck and my personal hand, that's possibly going to be, you know,
yeah, it introduces ambiguity, and you can do that as a designer. I don't think you can't, but you have to understand that it introduces rules complexity, and if you're accepting of that, then you're fine. I would like to see a picture index. Yes, I agree. Should the new games be gender neutral and color neutral now that we have so many problems with race and gender? Do you mean games or games rules?
I think that either way, I absolutely agree that there's no place for saying he or she when you're referring to a player of unidentified gender. If you want to talk about Mark puts down a red piece on his board and Sally puts down a red piece on 2 red pieces on her board because she has the advantage, then okay, that's fair, using it as an example. But if you are saying as an instruction, the starting player looks at the case and he reads it aloud, that is terrible. There is no space for that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to answer this question a little bit deeper, which is the rules should definitely be neutral for gender and race. I don't think the game should be, because if you say, "Oh, you're neutral for gender and race in our game," what does that mean? There's no such thing as neutral, right? Everybody has a race, everyone has a color, everyone has a gender, depending on what, but what that is depends on who is playing. So for example, if I had a game with 5 characters in it, and I want it to be neutral, what does neutral mean? You can't be neutral there. Each of them has to have a character, a race.
Each of them everyone has a gender, but that is not entirely true. I mean, I know someone, Phi, who prefers to be referred to as it, because for Phi...
No, what I mean is that they have a gender identity.
Sure.
Right? Yes. Not that they are gendered, but a gender identity exists for them. I use the wrong term.
I just wanted to,
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware that agender, non-gendered people who prefer to be referred to as it, yeah, they exist too. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that you can't have a game that is gender neutral. That's not possible. You either have a game that replicates the standard gender norms or fights against the standard gender norms. It's kind of like saying I have a game that is neutral on racism. It doesn't exist, right? Your game is either racist or not racist. There's no neutral on it. Your game is either...
What we can say is that my game features a diverse cast of genders and races. And I think that's what we should have. Certainly but where it comes in rules, I think the important thing is that gender and race should not be specified.
Yeah, I agree, because the rules and the game are not the same thing, right? Because the game is the game. It's representing the people or the characters in the game. Whereas the rules is for the player. If the player, you don't know what gender the player is, you don't know what skin color the player is, you don't know what ethnicity the player is, so you can't make those assumptions.
Okay, Alan Outson asks, why are they called rules rather than how to play or instructions to play? Yeah, I think you're right. It is just because it's the shorter word.
Yeah, I mean, you can put on the front of the book anything you want, right? Rules of play, you can put instructions, you can put how to play. I've seen all of these. So it's just a matter of what works for you, what feels friendliest. Like if you wanted to be really thematic, you could call it like, the hacker's manual, or whatever.
I mean, I'm just looking at, yeah, I don't think that it does even say anything on here. Like, it's just, this is Manhattan Project, Energy Empire. And it does tell you in really small writing, if you want to read the solo rules, the rules for the solo game are on page 19. But if you just want to read about it, this doesn't say it's the rule book, because you know what it is by looking at it. This is the only big bits of paper in the box. So I don't think you need to say these are the rules anywhere on the sheet. Necessarily. Unless you have like another, if you're using the Fantasy Flight's approach of going, okay, quick start rules, reference rules, then obviously you need to label them. But if you've only got one bit, why do you need to label it? Andrew January, with our example, would say your deck represents your garden at the start, and then within the rules, just talk about the deck. I mean, to me, that feels perfectly fine, personally.
Yeah. But I don't think you should, to pick up on that, I don't think you should use the word garden as deck, because gardens are not, usually you plant things in gardens, you don't take things out of gardens, unless your game is about harvesting vegetables, then maybe. You know, I mean, just like this is the kind of exactly the kind of thematic rules consideration that I'm talking about, right? Because usually in a garden, people associate it with planting, right? And you take cards out of a deck, you don't put cards into a deck.
So really, if it were a deck building game, then it should be like your personal garden, and maybe that's the, I don't know, garden store or the warehouse or something. And I think part of that is when you're designing your game, that comes back to much earlier on, when you're putting together the design, making sure that the theme and the mechanisms integrate. Because imagine if I have a game where my pigs are growing, but imagine if the bigger they are, the more valuable they are, but at a certain point, if they become too big, then they become less valuable. I mean, that's like, why? Why should my fat pig, if it's even fatter, be less valuable? Sure, it's even better. I mean, that doesn't seem intuitive. And so maybe there's a different way to approach it. Maybe you could say, okay, it's age now. As the pig gets older, it's better, but eventually it's going to become frail or something. Or maybe it's about something else along that way. We've got Cohen who asks about, should flavor text in rules be a must-have?
No, it depends on the game. If your game is like the thing is, like, define flavor text, right? If you're just talking about, if you're speaking specifically about like magic cards and flavor text, which doesn't speak about the rules at all, but gets people into the mood, no. But all rules should have some form of theming, right? And is that flavor text? Technically, you know, if you say like, you know, this is a game about gardening, that's flavor, right? It's not strictly telling you about the rules of the game, right?
You say that, but I mean, party games and abstract games, I mean, for all we call them abstract games are almost like the most literal games out there, because when you move a piece, you don't say you're moving your garden, which is an abstraction. You're actually literally moving this piece of wood. There's nothing else. And with a party,
but even like chess and Go, which are like the abstractest of abstract games, have metaphors and themes, right? Chess is about war.
I would say chess and Go are pretty theme, have a fair bit of theme.
Yeah,
I would
think
of something more like Mindleaf, which, so Mindleaf by Andy Hopwood, where you're putting things in a row, trying to get 3 in a row, and the little blocks push you around. Or something like Hex, where there is absolutely no theme there. There's no intentional theme. And I think that some games, they do historically come from a place of theme. But I mean, Yogi, party games, even more so, the only theme in Yogi is the thing that you're actually doing. So it's very literal. There's no, hey, we are Yogi practitioners trying to be the best yogi practitioner trying to show off to the yogi master or something like that. You know, they could have done that, but they didn't, because it's just, you are doing this, it's going to be funny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I think both approaches are valid. I would like both of them.
Creek Deck, hello Creek Deck. I think I recognize your face, but yeah.
Oh, it's Maya. Hello.
It's who?
Maya, my friend from Twitter.
Oh, hello Maya. Maya uses Windeck.
Is it Maya? Oh no. Oh no, I think I might have got their name wrong. I can't remember now. I'm so sorry. I said it so confidently.
But hello, whoever you are, and welcome to the channel. Oh, it's Maya. And so they're using Windeck because the word wind has theme and the word deck has the common name. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Personally like that. But stop with trying to put in too much humor to make it juicy. I know that some people rail against Vladar battles stuff. It's always, that's the thing. You're never going to please anybody. Just like no game can be for everybody, no version of the rules can be for everybody. And when you write a game, it's almost like this could be for this many people. And so I'm going to have to choose almost a subset of those people for whom to write the rules for.
I agree with that, except, again, it depends on the game, right? I think that everyone's favorite example of funny game rules is Galaxy Trucker, because the book is very funny. But I think that works for Galaxy Trucker because it's a very funny game. You know, it's not a serious, highly strategic game. It's very random. It's, you know, half your ship blows up during your journey. So it's so the rule book being funny, like you said, it helps set the tone for what the game is about.
Not sure what detail Alan was talking about. Alex says, I had a comment recently questioning why I call the components magic dice, where in the game the dice represent the flow and power of magic. Although to me it was thematic, to the player they were just dice.
Yeah, you're never going to please everybody because some players literally do not care what the theme is. They're just looking for good mechanics, and if the mechanics are good, they don't care. I personally think that's a very short-sighted and honestly privileged way of looking at games, because if you're never ever affected by a theme ever, then of course you can not care that your game is about war or colonization or racism or slavery. But yeah, some people just using thematic language in the rules. I think thematic players are happy when you let them tell a story in the game, and they don't really care about what happens in the rules. Could be just me though. Maya, I like the thing about the wind deck, definitely, because if you say this is the wind deck, this is the sun deck, this is the rain deck, and maybe if they have different backs and they all have different cards in it, then people will understand a lot more. Vladar's rules are generally the ones you either love or hate. You know, he has so incorporated flavor text. If you don't get into it, it makes the rules harder to understand. Not true. Mage Knight doesn't have any flavor text in the rules at all. Almost none. And because this is one of the heaviest Vladar games, I think Through the Ages also doesn't have flavor text in the rules. So I think Vladar's rulebooks understand that the lighter the game, the more he can get away with it, and the heavier the game, the more he can't. But I understand, but I'm sort of sidestepping your point, Maya. Your point is that some people are frustrated by the attempts to add things that are not rules into the rulebook, right? And yeah, that's legitimate. Some people don't like it, but that's a personal choice, and I think it helps set the game apart. It gives the game a lot of character. Yeah, I love him. Yeah, I love Vladar, but he's very cute in real life. I've met him. But he's apparently a massive introvert, and going to conventions is hell for him. He gets so like anxious and tired. Yeah. So
riffing off of what you were talking about, it's about people having unnecessary stuff in the rules. I don't know if you saw the whole discussion recently about start player rules that was started by, I think, Elizabeth Hargrave.
No, definitely.
Then I posted it, and then I got into a discussion with Bruno.
So for those who don't know, Elizabeth was talking about a game's first rules where the first player is the player who most recently traveled, right? And she was saying this rule makes a lot of assumptions. First of all, it assumes that people playing the game have the means to travel, have places that they can travel, that they have a passport, that they have access to a passport, that they're not a couple because couples travel together.
And it actually specified to another country, so it's not like you could say, okay, we travelled to the next city and house rule it, or say, oh, I travelled
international travel. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, so that's sorry. Yeah, travel abroad. Yes, exactly. Thank you. So so that's legitimate because it's making assumptions about people, right? And the thing is that she was just talking about it. She was not really talking about first player rules. She was talking about assumptions of inequality, right? Like the conversation there is not about starting player rules at all, right? But the conversation was about making people feel bad with a rule that doesn't actually make a difference to the game, because who starts the game 99% of the time doesn't matter.
Sure, right? And if it does,
in my house, now, if there's a first player advantage, then hopefully that the designer will have designed around it. But in my house, I'm usually the start player because I'm teaching the game, right? So I take the first turn, so I show everyone how it goes, you know? Does it? And I think what she was trying to say was that if you have something so small and inconsequential as a start player rule that already makes your players feel terrible, maybe don't do that.
Sure, I will agree with this. And then, you know, I retweeted and chatted about it, and then had a conversation where I basically suggested saying something like, choose the start player by any means you want. For example, blah, blah, blah. For example, if it's, for example, the first player to travel abroad, or for example, the last player to stroke a kitty, or for example, whatever. At least, and for me, there is a conversation to be had about start player rules, because they are a joke in that most of the time, you know, we put in things thinking, okay, this is going to be a funny thing, it's going to be a joke. But then there's a dichotomy between having this humor in the game, which is presented as an instruction, where the context of a set of rules is that these are some instructions you're going to follow. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and exactly. So I like exactly what you said, which is assign the first player any way you like, but we suggest you know.
And then
I want to pick up on
a couple of we had a notable designer coming in to say, hey, if you present it this way, that destroys the joke. It's like in a book where someone tells you it's a joke.
Is not important. The joke is not important. I'm not frustrated at you. I'm frustrated at that person. Right? The joke is not important. It's not important enough to make people feel bad about their living circumstances and like even that momentary flash of, you know, like, can you imagine if the starting rule, the first player rule was like the player who most recently lost a member of the family goes first? Why would you want to do that? I'll confess I followed the slide chart of the conversation into first player rules. It's nice to hear the point about small and consequential rules making people feel left out. Thank you. Yeah, no, so see, that's the thing, right? Like, this is the thing that frustrates me about a lot of, I know we're sidetracking here, but I really want to make this point. This is the thing that frustrates me a lot of conversations that people have about board games. People think it's about the color of the meeple, or people think it's in Puerto Rico, right? Like the slave meeples are brown, which is obviously shitty. Or people say like, oh, it's about the chainmail bikinis, but it's not. You know, we're not talking about the literal drawing of the bikini in the game. We are talking about the continued sexualization of female bodies for the consumption of the presumed heterosexual cisgendered male audience. It is not about the art, right? The art is just a entrance into that more important conversation. First layer rules are, in that case, are an entrance into the more important conversation of inequality in gaming and also in society. right? So that's exactly it. And I think that a lot of the time, I would say that a large amount of the time, people refuse to move on from the surface level of the conversation because they don't want to have the deeper discussion. They keep fixating on the thing. Like, for example, I see this a lot. Every time you bring up chainmail bikinis or like, sexily dressed women in games, everyone says, but isn't female empowerment, something that a lot of people think is important? Like, what if women choose to dress that way? One, she's a character in a board game. She doesn't exist. She doesn't wake up, she did not wake up that day and choose to put a bikini on, right? The artists do that. The artist made that choice. She doesn't exist. She has no choice. So by you fixating on that point, it is because you are either refusing to engage with the larger conversation about objectification of women, or you really have never ever stopped to think about objectification of women, or you just heard that line once and you want to spout it off and feel smart. I'm sure people aren't aware of the deeper issues under the surface. Well, why not? Why do we have to educate you all the time? Why aren't you educating yourselves? These are not new conversations. They've been around for decades and decades, right? I'm very frustrated about this because, and I know that we were just talking about rules and it was very nice until like, 10 seconds ago when I started getting angry. But why aren't people aware of these conversations? I'm not talking about a specific individual. It's okay that a specific individual is hearing about an issue for the first time. That's fine. Everybody has to learn somewhere. Everyone has to start somewhere. My problem is that the greater community as a whole benefits from not having to have these conversations because then they can just play games. This is what they say all the time. It's like, why are you making this so difficult? Why are you bringing this up again? Isn't this supposed to be fun? Yeah, we're trying to make it fun for everyone, you jerks. Including the people that are hurt by these policies. Aqua, I'm not trying to say that you. I'm not trying to pick on you or anything like that. I'm sorry if it came across that way. I'm just saying that.
I mean, I don't know who you is. I know you're not picking on me. But...
Oh no. I just feel like a lot of the time, people pretend to never have heard of it before to score points in the conversation, or they think that if we just say, "Oh, this again," do you have to bring this up again? It's like, yeah, we have to keep bringing it up because the last couple, 100 times we brought it up, you weren't listening.
And I think that for individuals, there is the sad reality that people can't be aware of everything. There is a lot of stuff going on. I completely agree.
Like I want to point back at something that I can't remember their name. Sorry, J Club 72 about dyslexia. I want to pick up on that.
Right? Sure. So Jeroen said, one thing I think is important about the layout. Do you think about people who have a reading disorder? Change fonts and font size. I have dyslexia and some fonts are hard for me to read. Sometimes the text is too long for me to digest, especially if it's not your first language. I think Jeroen might be Danish or Dutch.
Okay. Well, the thing is that I think that's a very important point. I've been wanting to pick it up for a while, and now is, I think, the perfect time to do so. Because I think it is universally agreed in board games that color blindness is a major issue. Right? Everybody in board games agrees that color blindness is a massive problem. If you have reds and greens that are too close together, or blues and yellows that are too close together, it's a big, big deal, and publishers need to make every possible effort to make sure that color blindness.
This stuff like Ticket to Ride, like they've got the little symbols in the cards. And every card. Okay, that's fairly easy to do because the cards are big. They only have one bit of information. But if you, looking at Magic, they've got little icons. It's not just the colors.
Yeah, okay. Color blindness, I just looked this up, affects 4.5% of the population. 8% of men and X% of women, right, are affected by color blindness. So according to BoardGamers, something which affects 4.5% of the population is absolutely critical, and every publisher must make every effort possible to get rid of it. Right? So this is, I would agree with the dyslexia issue as well, like, because dyslexia is, fairly common, right? What's the prevalence of dyslexia?
I'm not sure.
I'm looking it up right now.
And I mean, there's some common threads with dyspraxia, I'm aware, which can also have similar things. And frankly, if you do the things that make your design easier to read, break up the text,
yes.
I am guilty of this. And some of it is just, when I write rules, I am but one person. And that's why going forwards, I am having Chris on for possibly 2 days a week. We'll see how things work. And because having those extra inputs, because look, I'm not trying to defend myself. I guess I'm defending people who are not me, but are like me, if you know what I mean.
I get it.
Because everyone watching this kind of already knows who Bez is. Everyone knows, okay, I talk about my games all the time. You probably tuned in because you've heard of me. There's maybe one or two of you who've heard of Calvin, and then you've come on. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. But there are all sorts of people who are just, for them, even getting any game made is a difficult task. Like just getting that 1,000 copies of your first game, it's like a massive achievement. And so I think, for those small print runs, we can accept those kinds of things. But then when it gets to when you start having those resources, and when you are in a place of privilege, when you start having the time and people working for you, and when you're a big company, unwilling to spend like 100 quid to get someone to look at your stuff to make it far better to 5% of people, that's a problem.
So I've just looked it up. Dyslexia affects between 5 and 17% of the population. So it's more prevalent than color blindness. But how come we don't see people talking about dyslexia in board game rules, but we hear people talking about color blindness all the time? It's an awareness issue. The next thing I'll talk about when I lead up to that point is women are 55% of the population, but somehow sexism in board games is okay. But color blindness in board games is an issue that every publisher must drop everything to fix. It's just you're welcome, Drew. It is important. This is why I was saying earlier, even though I wasn't thinking about dyslexia when I said it, you did hear me say I think that paragraph should be broken into two, because even for people who don't have dyslexia, it's easier for them. It's easier for people to read text that isn't in a gigantic chunk. Right? Yeah.
And that's the thing that I really want to have Michael Heron on at some point. I know they warned me that they might not be in. I reached out. They said they might not be into a reasonable mental state at that point. Now, I think I've decided that this is a thing that I'm probably going to continue doing for a while. I'll reach out to them again. But Michael Heron of Meeples Like Us has done some great work. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Meeples Like Us. So one really interesting thing that Michael Heron says is that making things accessible makes it more accessible for everyone. Because think about that color blindness issue. For example, let's think about if you've got an extra little symbol, so you don't need to distinguish between red and green, you also have this slight shape difference or something, it's going to make it easier to tell apart at a glance. It's going to make it easier on our brain. There's like another avenue of information to tell them apart so you don't get confused too easily. And if text is broken up, and yes, hello Ross, it's lovely to see. Yes, it's a great resource. And if you break up your text, if you have clear diagrams, if you think about the fonts, that's quite possibly going to make it better for everyone, not just those people. And the same is true of things like, I think this all originated from someone asking if how we think about gendered language, and I can't even imagine language that assumes some greater identity, although I know that it's kind of all there bubbling under the surface. And I think the key takeaway is to really remind yourself when you are making games that these are games that are about bringing people together. These are about games that, whether you are a bunch of people in London, maybe my game might be played by some financial people in the middle of London, some rich fat cats, I don't know, maybe. It might be played by some people, you know, who are living in Brixton. It might be who are struggling to make ends meet. It might be played by some people over in Malaysia, or some people in Nicaragua, or wherever. You know, I'm not saying that it's likely to reach those people, but you know, you have to remember that these people exist, and the more that you are Eurocentric, the more that we are appealing and embracing the patriarchy, the more that those things are going to propagate themselves, if you know what I mean. I say it, if you know what I mean, because I'm genuinely, I guess.
I do understand what you're trying to say. And I agree with Michael's general point, which is that when something becomes more accessible for everyone, it becomes more accessible, period. So when something is made more accessible, it becomes more accessible to everybody. Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, the general example is always ramps, like ramps instead of stairs. I love ramps. You know, I like walking up ramps. They're just fun. I wouldn't use them, you know, if they're blocking, if disabled people are trying to get their wheelchair up them, I would use the stairs. But I love ramps. They're so much fun.
And I'm just going to post a link to Meatballs Like Us everywhere, so everyone has that. Yes, I think, Maya, I think that in general, reference cards do make a game more accessible, but of course there's, you know, a certain point at which there's no need for a reference card. Let's be honest. I mean, I don't think you need a reference card to play Yogi, but I would say that, sure, Happy Pigs, if it came up with reference card that said, play your card, check the cards, do the actions, check the, you know, there's 4 steps to each turn, and just having those 4 steps on the card, it is going to remind you. And having something there so that you don't have to keep looking at the rules, something that you can help keep this in your brain. Reference cards are always a good thing, I believe. Yeah. The only downside is the cost, obviously.
Everything is down to cost, right? Like if adding reference cards to your games means you need to double, like, you know, add another sheet of printout, you're literally doubling your production costs in terms of your printouts. So it's difficult.
Got to dyslexiefont.com is not one that I've checked out, but I will check out after this stream. Oh yeah, I think I remember this. But I think there's, yeah, handwritten things are generally better. I've heard people saying that they appreciate the original LDEC typeface because, for example, the U, it's not perfectly symmetrical, and things are slightly more bottom heavy. And if you're making a word game, frankly, I kind of feel like it behooves you to make up your own typeface or to design your own typeface, because frankly, that is the art for your game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But not everyone can, but I do understand what you're trying to say.
Every time you come on, it feels like we do get into discussion about accessibility, which is fine, because accessibility is so important, and having everyone be able to enjoy the things that we make. Ultimately, I think it's the same for you, Calvin. I am making things. I hope that people enjoy my things. And for me, whilst I would like to be able to earn an income that is one day, you know, enough to say, hey, I'm going to go over to Malaysia and see my friend Calvin, and yeah, kind of maybe even hang out for a bit, and potential. You've got a lots of bubble tea places near you, right?
Oh yeah, tons. No,
But
literally,
anyway,
there's a place near where we live that's like five-ish minutes away by drive. There are at least 10 bubble tea shops just in that one square.
nice. So
Not
basically,
even
what you could do is you could have like enough. Anyway, the point is like, yes, I would like to earn an income to make certain things happen, but the reason why I choose to do this rather than another line of work is fundamentally because I like the idea of having a thing that is enjoyed by people around the world. And I think that most people who are working in the board game industry and most people are working into any creative industry, whether it is actors or writers or anything, or people who want to have their things enjoyed by people around the world. And so if you think about it, why put up barriers to people enjoying your stuff, and fundamentally try and make sure that your thing is bringing joy and good times rather than coming back to what Calvin said, you can't be neutrally racist. You can be either racist or not racist. Or I know Eric, oh darn, Eric Lang, that's the one. Eric Lang talks about the notion of being anti-racist, that to actually progress as a society, we have to not only be not racist, we have to be actively anti-racist and call it out. And so that's why, yeah, I've always got time to have these slight tangents, but yeah, that is what it's like. Oh, and Johan, just to clarify, I did not mean necessarily having a typeface that is unique, like a body font, but certainly in the cards. And frankly, if you've got the, certainly for a big company, like if you look at Magic the Gathering, they do not have any off-the-shelf fonts anywhere in that game anymore. They've got their own typeface, which they call blethering, and it's, you can ensure that the font that you create is clear. Yes, it comes back to if you buy stuff off other people, you can trust that they did a good job, but you are putting the trust into them. You can also, if it's down to energy and time, do you have the resources? And yeah. And we can get into rules videos another time. I feel like we probably should wrap up around this time. I want to be respectful of your time, Calvin.
Yeah, no, it's fine. This has been a great discussion, and I am making up for coming in late. I have no idea why it's so difficult for me to remember something that happens every 2 weeks instead of every week.
I mean, if you wanted to come every week, we could make the discussions a bit shorter.
I can't do that, sorry.
That's fine. I mean, like, we'd have to, but anyway, to go back to everything we were talking about, I think it is now time to start recapping, probably. And
sure.
I know that I'm having Ella on. We're going, like, hoping to really nail down into all of these discussions of rules videos, reviews, and like all sorts of things in each thing. Try to keep each one a bit more focused. But here, this was just like a big, wide overview and an introduction to writing rules and rule books. And so I guess what we're really talking about today was the written rule sheet, whether it be something like this, or like this, or like that, or like, where's my Yogi one gone? Oh, I lost it. Can't find it anymore. Huh. Yeah, things go missing on my table. I can't find my Yogi rules. But anyway, we are talking about written rules, and we said that, to recap, we talked about onboarding, we talked about having the reasons that you might want to have a rule sheet which was for learning. Oh wait. Oh, sorry, I meant to make that into that kind of banner. For learning, for reminding, for referring mid-game, for setting tone, and potentially for entertaining, although the entertainment really isn't the key point. But I think we're agreed that this is almost like the order of priority. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay, we talked about blind testing. We talked about piggybacking, whether it's the garden. You picked up on the fact that you should not call your deck the garden because you are taking things out of it. Unless, I guess, maybe you're uprooting your vegetables. I don't know. We talked about having common symbols. And yes, if you've got, don't invent your own symbology and words. If something already exists, that is going to be easy for people to understand. That will be fine. And that, yeah, we can only do so much. It's the notion of brevity versus clarity. To quote Calvin, that it's generalities versus edge cases. That, you know, we can say so much, do this, do this, do this, but during certain times it's going to be different. We talked about the whole start player thing. Firstly, because it represents this whole discussion of making assumptions of who your players are, and please don't do that. But also in terms of having a joke as part of it. In a book, if people don't get a joke, the worst case scenario is they just don't see the joke. But in a rule sheet where people are seeing that as instructions that they have to follow, the worst case scenario is that then they feel it results in a lot of bad feelings. And ultimately, games are just about emotional engines. Games are about feelings, and feelings are the most important thing. So, I mean, I want to really rebuke anyone who says, oh, well, feelings don't matter, because there are people who say that, which really annoys me.
Yeah,
anyway,
same.
We talked about terminology, having clear terminology. We talked about humor, where it can be appropriate as long as it doesn't take away from the clarity. We talked about ostracizing people. We talked about thinking about colorblindness, about dyslexia, about sexism, about racism, all these things. And yeah, glad you could reply on to my favorite format is a booklet. I think, do you mean as opposed to one folded out sheet of paper, you prefer something more? Is that, I'm slightly confused by that. But yeah, that is our recap. Do we have anything else to say?
No. I mean, thanks so much, Jerome, for bringing up all of the just like seeing stuff. Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, I would like to give a massive. I feel like the thank yous should come before the recap, and maybe I'll change this banner. But I want to give a massive thank you to everyone. Thank you to all my to Alan Oughton, to Alex, to Xate, Andrew January, Creek Geek, Maya, J Fulsgaard Geroen, Ross. It's lovely having you all. And yeah, let me actually change that banner right now because it feels like wrap up is the last bit. But as we wrap up, do we have anything else to say?
Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for commenting. We had a very insightful discussion.
And thank you very much for joining in. I'm looking forward to Bez's big bladder book one day. Well, hopefully, if I get to the situation where, honestly, the main reason why this has not come out yet is because I don't believe I have enough people who would be willing to pay for a £30 game from me right now. I believe that from another publisher, sure, if ITB publishes something, but I don't yet have the fan base. That is fundamentally what it comes down to. I want to be able to print it and at least not be out of pocket. To be honest, I've decided that it's going to be yeah, a work of love. But yeah, anyway, I really look forward to having it one day. And thank you very much. if you want to find me, I'm stuffbybez.bigcartel.com, where you can buy my stuff, twitter.com/stuffbybez, where I tweet a lot, instagram.com/stuffbybez, where I share pictures of games I played, games I'm working on, or pretty things around the world, twitch.tv/stuffbybez, where I stream, facebook.com/thingsbything, or stuffbybez@gmail.com, where you can email me. And where can people find you, Calvin? ITHAYLA.
Yep. A lot of people say Italia, but I guess it's a difficult, series of things to read. So I don't blame them.
I mean, it's always difficult to pronounce things, and it takes some awareness of the culture. For example, the way that the letter I, as it's kind of might be written, if written in English, is going to sound very different if it's Shigeru Miyamoto, or if it's Jim, or if it's Vido.
Sure, definitely.
But as we close up, what are we looking forward to? Hopes and ambitions, it's over to you for this final section. I would like to invite everyone, including Calvin and including myself, and this, to share with us what's in as much detail as you're comfortable with, or you can just think about it in your own mind if you don't want to share. And what are you looking forward to? Maybe in the next today, maybe it's just a meal, maybe you're going out, maybe it's next week or a month away, or maybe even next year, or once all this has blown over. And what do you hope for? Do you have a preference on who goes first, Calvin?
I'm looking forward to publishing my first board game review in a really long time.
Oh,
feeling very blocked on that front. So I finally finished The Visitor's Guide to the Wildlands, which will be publishing hopefully next week.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's my thing, and my hope is that I can keep doing that. I can keep writing and publishing reviews. That would be great.
Got Alan Oughton, who's thinking of going into central London today, not been in for almost 6 months. Wow. Stay safe, and I hope that you have a good time.
Yep.
I am going to mention I've got a consultation thing with a company that I don't know if I can talk about, who might make games potentially for children, and I'm actually really looking forward to chatting them, because yeah, it's going to be really exciting. I hope that I do a good job, and they kind of ask me back to kind of work more on their stuff, and I'm also hoping to get yeah, this is like really minor things, but just get the next few streams kind of put up, and I do a bit, and then do a bit of work on the LARP that I mentioned, and a bit of work on getting Yogi Stock Guru ready for a festival nomination. And thank you very much, Alan. Jeroen is looking forward to the modification of their home. There will be an extra room that's going to be added soon. Looking forward to finishing up a prototype to start playtesting. Hoping to make any income next year, since I will be trying to do that through games. I'm writing a pitch for festival also for a board game I've been working on for a while, so hope it will be accepted. And
amazing.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I am going to send positive energy to all of you, and hope that all your things come true, and everyone stay safe, enjoys life, and has a wonderful, depending on where you are at this point, it might be Friday or it might be Thursday. And so I hope you enjoy, your remaining hours. Share, spread the word if you've enjoyed this. My next streams are something that you can find if you go to my pinned tweet on Twitter. That's probably the easiest place to find them. Tomorrow, I'm going to be chatting to someone about why do we make the things we make. So it's kind of about the motivations from a designer perspective, which I had not thought of that topic, so I'm really interested to chat about them with. And Saturday, I'm going to be chatting to Casey, who made Gbosi and many other games. It's based in Nigeria, and I'm going to be here every 10 a.m. and Tuesday 8 p.m. all UK time, so you'll have to translate that into your time zone. Is there anything else you want to finish up saying, Calvin?
No, thanks everyone for coming. Good luck to everyone in their projects.
Well, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Maybe see you tomorrow. Bye bye, everyone.
See you.